"You called me." A nervous, desperate laugh escaped her. "You're not real. None of this is real." But even as she spoke, a shadow loomed just beyond the candle's weak glow, a formless darkness that seemed to breathe, to pulse with silent rage. Her vision blurred, the room spinning around her, and yet she read on, her voice a frantic whisper. The tale's final words burned into her mind. "Those who do not stop reading when they hear the whisper will never escape the shadow." Her heart seized, a cold knife twisting in her chest. Too late, she understood. The story was not just a tale. It was a warning. Her reflection in the dark window showed her pale, terrified face, but behind her, a darker shape loomed, a shifting shadow. Panic surged through her, and she tore her gaze away, slamming the book shut. Silence, thick and suffocating. The candle's light was barely a faint glow now, the darkness pressing closer, whispering against her skin. "It's over," she whispered, clutching the book to her chest, her breaths ragged. It was just a story. Just a story. But a faint, cold touch brushed against her shoulder and the whisper returned. Softer, almost tender. "You called me." Her eyes darted to the darkened corners, but the shadows remained still. Yet the chill lingered, a quiet promise that something was watching. Elara's hands trembled as she clutched the ancient weathered book, her fingers gripping the cracked leather cover as though it were a lifeline. Her eyes raced across the faded, cursed words that seemed to twist and writhe beneath her gaze. Sweat beaded on her forehead, a cold sheen despite the oppressive heat in the room, yet she forced herself to keep reading. Her logical mind whispered that it was all just a tale, a cruel trick of her mind playing upon her fear. But the whispers in the darkness grew louder, rising like a mournful choir of distant wails, sorrowful and accusing, their cold breath brushing against her ears. Each word seemed to throb with a dark pulse, a heartbeat of something ancient and malevolent. The single candle on her desk sputtered, its feeble flame shrinking, struggling against the thick shadows that pulsed and swayed around her. The darkness seemed alive, creeping closer with every shuddering breath she took. Panic gnawed at her chest, but she bit down on her fear, her stubborn will pushing her to believe this was nothing but a legend, a whispered tale from the old village elders. But suddenly, the room was swallowed by an icy cold, a chill so deep that it sank into her bones, numbing her fingers. Her breath misted before her, a ghostly wisp in the oppressive darkness. And then a shape began to form. A shadowy figure, its form distorted and flickering, twisted and writhed in the dim light. Empty, hollow eyes stared at her, pits of endless darkness that seemed to devour the light itself. Its face was a shifting blur, yet there was a malice that radiated from it, a hunger that chilled her soul. The whispers converged into a single, clear voice, a cold, accusing whisper brushing against her ear, a breath of death. "Why didn't you stop?" it whispered, its voice a raspy echo that seemed to scrape against her sanity. Elara's resolve shattered, a scream tearing from her lips as she staggered back, the cursed book slipping from her grasp and crashing to the floor with a dull, lifeless thud. Her legs were weak, but panic surged within her, propelling her forward. She burst from her room, her breath coming in frantic gasps, racing down the darkened hallway. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting and reaching, their ghostly fingers clawing at the air as though desperate to seize her. Her voice, raw and desperate, filled the suffocating darkness. "Help! Please!" But the only response was the cold, whispering presence, always just behind her, its voice trailing like a deadly caress. She crashed into her grandmother's room, the old woman lying still in her bed, her silver hair spread like a pale halo against the pillow. But something was wrong. Her grandmother's breathing was slow, unnaturally deep, as though trapped in a dreamless, unnatural slumber. "Grandmother, wake up! Please!" Elara pleaded, shaking the frail form, her own tears burning hot against her cheeks. But there was no response, no stir, only the suffocating silence. A shadow slipped across the walls, whispering with a chilling plea, "You called me. You cannot escape." Her heart thundered in her chest, and for a moment, despair swallowed her. But then she heard hurried footsteps, a blessed sound of life breaking through the darkness. Marcus burst in, his face pale with alarm, his eyes wide. "Ilara, what's happening?" he demanded, his voice sharp with worry. But the words seemed distant, muffled beneath the cold, whispering presence that circled them. Ilara's trembling hand pointed wildly to the twisting shadow that lurked in the corner. "There! Can't you see it?" she cried, but Marcus's gaze met only empty darkness. "Ilara, you're scaring me. There's nothing there," he insisted, his strong hands gripping her shoulders, trying to steady her. But to Ilara, the shadow was everywhere, its cold touch brushing against her, its whispered accusations wrapping around her like a suffocating mist. Her wide, fear-filled eyes stared beyond Marcus into the darkness that pulsed and shifted like a living nightmare. Marcus tried to pull her close, his voice a desperate whisper. "It's okay. I'm here." But her terror was beyond his reach. Morning's pale light crept through the misty village, but for Ilara, the world remained trapped in a cold twilight. The shadow no longer just followed her. It clung to her, a dark stain that seemed to hover just behind her reflection in the mirror. Her pale face stared back at her, her own eyes hollow with fear. But there, over her shoulder, the twisted, shifting shape lurked, its hollow gaze burning into her. Her voice was a broken whisper. "It's becoming a part of me." Marcus's face drained of a color as he watched the shadow stretch unnaturally behind her, twisting and shuddering even in the pale morning light. "It's the curse, the legend," he muttered, pieces of old stories, whispered warnings from his grandmother, surfacing in his mind. Panic clawed at him, but he refused to let fear claim them. There must be a way. We need to end this. Desperation drove his thoughts, piecing together the fragments of the ancient tales that haunted the village. Marcus's mind raced, and suddenly a spark of hope broke through the suffocating despair. "Ilara, the book. We have to burn it. It's the only way," he cried, gripping her shoulders, his voice a fierce anchor against the storm of fear. Ilara's eyes widened with a wild mixture of hope and dread. "But it wouldn't burn. I tried." The shadow's whispers grew frantic, twisting around them like a freezing wind. Marcus's voice was steady, a defiant roar against the darkness. "Then we must speak the final words of the tale as it burns." The cold, oppressive presence surged, desperate and wild. "No, you cannot," it whispered, its voice a storm of bitter, accusing wails. But Marcus pulled Ilara toward the fireplace, his hand gripping hers with fierce determination. In the dying light, they stood together, and Ilara's trembling fingers lifted the cursed book. The pages rustled, their dark symbols shifting, resisting her touch. The whispers grew, a chorus of sorrow and rage pressing against them. But Ilara's voice rose, her fear turning to fierce defiance. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." With a determined cry, she hurled the book into the flames. Dark smoke twisted from the pages, writhing like a living serpent. The shadows screamed, their hollow faces flickering in the rising smoke. Marcus gripped her hand, his voice a fierce whisper. "The final words, Ilara. Speak them." Her voice wavered but grew strong. "By the light that banishes darkness, by the truth that shatters lies. Return to the void, lost spirit. Your tale ends here." A wailing scream tore through the room, the shadow twisting, burning, and then dissolving, like mist beneath the morning sun. The whispers faded, the cold weight lifting from Ilara's chest. Silence fell. Only the warm glow of the dying fire remained, and the morning light spilled through the window, pure and bright. Marcus pulled her close, their shadows merging, normal, whole, and untouched by darkness. For the first time, Ilara's breath came easy, the warmth of life filling her once more. Ilara's trembling hands gripped Marcus's arms, her fingers digging into his sleeves as the dying embers of the cursed book cast a faint, flickering glow across the dim room. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, the echoes of the shadow's whispers still crawling beneath her skin. But then, through the chaos in her mind, a memory stirred. A faint, distant voice, her grandmother's aged, whispered words, a tale told by the fire in the quiet of a winter night. Those who call her must release her. The words slipped. From her lips, barely more than a whisper, but Marcus's eyes widened, his face a mix of fear and desperate hope. Say it, Ilara. Say it with conviction. His grip on her shoulders tightened, his voice a lifeline pulling her from the drowning darkness. Ilara's gaze locked onto his, the warmth of his touch grounding her. She drew in a sharp breath, forcing her racing heart to slow, her voice steadying as she closed her eyes. Those who call her must release her. Her voice rose, clear and strong, cutting through the thick shadows that pulsed like a living thing around them. Silence followed, an oppressive, dreadful stillness. The air thickened, the dying fire's glow shivering, and then a piercing, inhuman wail tore through the silence, a sound so sharp and filled with rage that it seemed to shatter the very air. The cottage walls trembled, the windows rattled in their frames, and the darkness writhed like a living beast, coiling and twisting in a frantic frenzy. The shadow lunged, a formless, swirling mass with hollow, furious eyes, a cold wind swirling around them. But the words hung in the air, shimmering like a faint, ghostly light, an invisible barrier the shadow could not pass. Its shape faltered, rippling as though caught in a violent storm, and then, like a beast caught in a trap, it recoiled, spiraling toward the crackling flames of the cursed book. The fire roared, its orange light blazing brighter, and the shadow writhed within the licking flames, its screams muffled beneath the crackling embers. Yet, even in its agony, it fought, clawed, smoke-like hands reaching, grasping at the air, trying to escape. But the light consumed it, swallowed it, until, in a final, desperate burst, it twisted into ash, scattering into the hearth's warm glow. The room fell into a heavy, stunned silence. The suffocating chill lifted, replaced by gentle warmth that seeped through the air. The soft, golden light of dawn spilled through the frost-touched window, pure and untouched. Exhaustion struck Ilara like a crashing wave. Her knees buckled and she collapsed toward the cold wooden floor. Marcus was there, catching her, pulling her against his chest. His own body trembled, his heartbeat pounding against her ear, but his touch was warm, steady. Ilara's breath came in gasps, her chest rising and falling as though she had run for miles, but the darkness was gone. No whispers lingered in the corners, no shadow twisted in the faint morning light. Beyond the misted glass, the soft hum of the waking village stirred, distant voices and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. The chill that had clung to her, that had gnawed at her bones, melted beneath the soft, comforting warmth of dawn. Marcus's voice was a gentle murmur, his fingers brushing back her damp, tangled hair. "It's over, Ilara. It's really over." His words were firm, but his eyes still carried a flicker of doubt, a faint shadow of lingering fear. Ilara's gaze drifted, falling to the fireplace where the cursed book lay in a pile of smoldering ashes, faint wisps of smoke curling upward. The darkness was gone, but her mind struggled to accept the calm, her heart still caught between fear and disbelief. Days stretched by, and the village of Verloc, nestled beneath the mist-shrouded forest, returned to its quiet, slow life. The stories of shadows and cursed whispers faded to faint murmurs, whispered by the old men at the village square or exchanged in hushed voices among the children. But for Alara, those tales were no longer just stories. She spent more time with her grandmother, no longer rolling her eyes or brushing off the old woman's whispered words. She listened, truly listened, to the ancient tales, the whispered charms and the cautious prayers woven into the everyday tasks. Her grandmother's weathered face softened with a gentle smile as she noticed the change in Alara. No longer the skeptical girl dismissing the old ways, but someone who asked questions, who sought the knowledge hidden within the folklore. Alara's hands learned the delicate touch needed for the herbal poultices. Her voice repeated the whispered prayers of protection. She moved with a quiet caution, her curiosity tempered by a new reverence. Marcus visited often, his presence, a warm comfort, their bond now deeper, marked by shared terror and survival. He spoke of old tales he once thought were just stories, and together they listened to Grandmother Odette, her voice a soft, steady thread that wove wisdom into their lives. The darkness was gone, the whispering shadow a fading memory. But the lessons it left behind stayed etched in Alara's heart. Yet one crisp morning, as the mist hung like a silvery veil beyond her window, Alara stood before the old misted mirror in her room, brushing her long, dark hair. Her reflection stared back, calm and clear, the soft morning light warming her pale cheeks. But then, something flickered, a faint, almost imperceptible blur at the edge of her gaze. Her heart skipped a beat, her hand paused, and she leaned closer, her green eyes searching the glass. Nothing but her own face stared back, but the faint chill that brushed her spine refused to fade. "Just my imagination," she whispered, forcing a small, shaky smile. Yet the weight of that whisper clung to her, a soft shadow lingering in the corners of her mind. The village of Verloc was peaceful again, the mist drifting lazily over, the thatched roofs, the forests whisper a gentle breeze. But as Alara stepped back from the mirror, the faint shadow that had once twisted in her life seemed gone. Yet, somewhere, in the depths of her memory, the cold whisper of darkness remained like a forgotten murmur, waiting.